Holy City Center Radio, it is episode 127, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Friday, May 26th, 2023. Happy Friday. I hope you are finishing up what was a fantastic week and looking forward to an incredible weekend. I know the weather is looking a little iffy, but there's plenty to do. Go to holycitycenter.com/events. You'll be able to see what is going on throughout the area, whether it's indoors, outdoors, or both. And don't forget as well, when you go to holycitycenter.com, there's a specific page just for weekend events. You can always bookmark that so you can easily get back to it. But the link I gave you a few moments ago is the main way to see the entire events calendar, which you can scroll through. So if you want to look at, Monday, Tuesday, and into next week, you can do that as well. Two big events that are beginning this weekend are the Spoleto Festival USA and the Piccolo Spoleto Festival, which is like that kind of spin-off version of the Spoleto Festival. It was originally created to have like some free and cheaper options for those who still want to take in some of the arts and see some of the musicians and creatives that are coming through in different fashions in an environment where they don't have to pay as much for tickets. Although the main festival, has done a pretty good job of getting more events. Some are free, some are, they've started to get more events that are a little bit, less expensive. And, they also have to pay what you can option on some performances. So it's not that you can't get those with the main festival, but that's why the Piccolo Spoleto Festival was kind of created. So there's going to be all sorts of things revolving around the arts going on this weekend. And some events have already been moved inside as they, are getting ready for potential inclement weather this weekend. So keep an eye on their official websites throughout the weekend. They may make more announcements of events being moved or maybe canceled if they can't find an indoor space for them. But they've already started doing that, including the opening ceremony for Spoleto has already been moved inside to Festival Hall. That event is actually free and open to the public, and it is today, Friday at noon. So, keep an eye on that. Go to the weekend events calendar in Holy City Center. Get out there and enjoy your weekend. But before you can do that, you got to finish listening to this podcast. We have so much news, some very big stories. So let's not waste any more time. Let's dive in. Governor Henry McMaster on Thursday was joined by members of the General Assembly and some others as he signed Bill S-474, the 6-week abortion ban. That has now been signed into law and takes effect immediately, although legal challenges are expected, so we'll see what happens there. So yes, that means the General Assembly passed it, of course, but did not pass a budget this session. They also did not do things like expand Medicaid or raise the minimum wage. And of course, South Carolina public schools still remain some of the worst in America. But hey, got that 6-week abortion ban passed, despite the fact the last time they passed it, it was deemed unconstitutional. And this bill is very, very similar to that one. However, the Supreme Court here in the state is different now. One judge retired. She was the only woman on the bench, and now it is an all-male Supreme Court, the only state in this country that is entirely made up of men. So there is some thought process here that maybe because of that, this version will end up being ruled fine by the state Supreme Court when it is ultimately challenged. So we'll see what happens there. But just in case, let's get into the details of what this bill says if it does, in fact, remain a law. So first of all, the official name that is given is misleading, and that's one reason why I'm not using the official name. As we've talked about on this podcast before, politicians frequently name their bills and prospective legislation silly things, so that when they say, hey, we want to pass the, I'm just going to make something off the top of my head here. We want to make the Protect Children from All Danger Act. Who would oppose such a thing? Yeah, by the name alone, you're like, yeah, of course. But the devil's in the details, so the name of the bill doesn't necessarily reflect what's in it. One of the many misleading things, including the bill title and in the bill, is this use of the term, fetal heartbeat. Well, it's a little misleading. I get the spirit of what they're going for. So you're going to not really hear me use that term. You're going to hear me as I discuss this using like the official actual terminology that should be used and what it actually is. But so if you hear on the regular news them talking about this, fetal heartbeat bill, or a title similar to that, that's why you're hearing that. So, all right, let's get into the details. So this new act prohibits abortions after electrical activity from the embryo is detected. This is usually around 6 weeks of pregnancy, which has been noted many times is generally before people even know they're pregnant. So there are exceptions for the life or health of the pregnant patient, medical emergencies, and fetal fatal anomalies. Those are exceptions really at any point. So no matter when a medical emergency may occur, whether it is 7 weeks in, 12 weeks in, 20 weeks in, whatever it is, as long as it is deemed necessary, abortions are allowed for those reasons. The other exceptions are in cases of rape or incest. Those are only good up until 12 weeks. So they do expand for those cases another 6 weeks. Now, some more of the details. A physician who performs an abortion based on the exceptions of rape or incest must report the allegation to the sheriff in the county in which the abortion was performed. The report must include the name and contact information of the patient making the allegation. Yes, that's correct. If someone becomes pregnant via rape or incest and wants to get an abortion, they are required, I should say the physician is required to report that to the sheriff and include the patient's name in that, which ultimately, of course, means the sheriff is going to end up, someone from their department is going to end up contacting the victim at some point in time. Without diving super deep into these topics, I'm sure many of you are well aware anyway. There are a plethora of reasons why someone who is raped or becomes pregnant from a rape or from incest may not want to get the law involved. That is their decision. This is taking that away in some capacity. And as you know, could re traumatize them over and over and over again, depending on how far it goes in the legal world. Getting back to the bill. An abortion provider who is to perform an abortion for any reason, not just for the exceptions, is required to perform an obstetric ultrasound. The patient must be informed of the nature and risks of undergoing or not undergoing the proposed abortion procedure as well. As far as that ultrasound, um, the type of ultrasound doesn't really matter. It comes down to what the doctor and the patient think is the best type for the situation. So, regardless, once the ultrasound has been taken, the patient has to be informed of risks, of continuing with their plan to have an abortion, and if they decide not to. In addition, the patient must be told the probable gestational age of the embryo, if there is a present of a quote unquote heartbeat. Again, at 6 weeks, it's not really a heartbeat because it doesn't have a heart. The embryo is just producing electrical charges. But if that is present and viewable, they must be told that. An abortion may not be performed sooner than 60 minutes following completion of the ultrasound. So if they go through this whole spiel about, what could or could not happen with the procedure, and the patient still wants to move forward, they have to wait an hour. Now, this isn't as bad as some other proposals I've seen in other states. Some states, even when Roe v. Wade was in place, they still had mandatory waiting times. Some were days, some were weeks. Obviously, this is a way to try all these things you're hearing are ways, of course, to try to convince the patient to continue their pregnancy. So they're, an hour is not as bad as I said, like I've heard in other places, but that's obviously the point of this, is to have them sit there with this information they were just given and try to convince them and hope that the person sitting there changes their mind. That's the point of that, of course. Now, the patient does have the right to decline to view or hear the ultrasound explanation after they are informed of their right, and offered an opportunity to view the images and hear the explanation. So after it's been offered and they're told that they have a right to decline, they can do so. However, if the patient declines, they have to complete a form saying that they declined the opportunity. So you have to sign something saying, yes, I was told. Again, just another step in this whole process. Now, as far as penalties, there's nothing against the patient. However, a physician or medical provider, whatever their official title is, who violates any of this can be found guilty of a felony, and upon conviction the word must, be fined $10,000 and imprisoned for not more than 2 years or both. So that's the punishment side of things. Some other details that I saw in the bill as I was going through it today. It also requires child support to start at conception and allows judges to decide if a minor can have an abortion should a parent or guardian be unavailable. Now, in the case of a patient who becomes pregnant as a result of rape or incest, the biological father also is responsible for the full cost of any expenses incurred by the mother for mental health counseling arising out of the rape or incest. I've talked about this on previous podcasts. If you're going to pass an extreme ban like this, where most people don't even know they're pregnant at 6 weeks, and you're assigning personhood to the embryo at that point, because it's 6 weeks in the gestational period. That is the stage it is at. It's not even considered a fetus. That's why the whole fetal heartbeat, both terms are incorrect in this scenario. I get the spirit, but it's not a fetus at that point. It's an embryo. That's the stage it's in. And it doesn't have a heartbeat because it doesn't have a heart. Now, if you're going to pass that and you're assigning personhood to that embryo, these are the types of things that have to go along with it. Child support has to start at conception. And if someone commits rape or incest, the biological father has to cover the cost of mental health counseling. I didn't see that coming out of this, since there's lots of talks about mental health, but a lot of times the Republican Party chooses not to expand mental health coverage or really do much of anything in that capacity. So I was surprised that that made it into the bill and stayed in the bill. So again, if you're going to do these things, that's great, but the bill itself, well, a lot of us wish it didn't pass anyway. But if you're going to pass it, you have to do your best to take care of not just the embryo, since that's what you're doing, and that's the point of this whole bill, but you also have to do your best to take care of whoever the pregnant patient is. So there's that. So that is where we're currently at. As I mentioned, legal challenges are absolutely expected, just like the last time they passed a bill for 6-week abortion ban. I will absolutely keep you posted on that. As of recording, that has not been filed yet, but you can expect it. But more importantly, this law is currently in effect. So until there's not only a legal challenge, but a judge rules that, okay, this is on hold, this law is in effect right now. So you need to know that, especially if you are someone who is or could become pregnant. So keep that in mind as we go forward. And as I said, I will certainly provide you with updates as far as legal challenges and things of that nature. The last thing I will say about this topic in this episode is that if you are someone who can become pregnant, I am sorry that this is happening. I'm very well aware that as a cis male, this doesn't affect me the same way it affects someone who can get pregnant. And doesn't mean I can't be upset or disappointed in it or couldn't be affected at some point, but it's nowhere near what other people are experiencing and going through. So I know there's some people who are happy with this, and that's fine. But for those of you who are not and are struggling, which I know is a lot, I'm very, very sorry that this is happening. And let's just hope the Supreme Court here in the state rules the same way it did last time. The other big story that has been going on this week has been that manhunt that has spanned multiple counties and several days here in the area, but it did come to an end. So that is good news. So after a search that spanned 2 counties and about 4 days, a wanted man on multiple charges was arrested late Wednesday afternoon. Michael Burham, who is 34, was arrested around 5:17 p.m. in Hugie, according to Berkeley County Sheriff Dwayne Lewis. He said a resident called 911 around 3:30 to report a suspicious person behind the shed of their home on United Drive. Lewis then said that the suspect was hiding behind tarps near the family's woodshed. They also said Burham would initially be taken to the Berkeley County Detention Center where he would be questioned, but he was not sure when he would be taken or where he would be taken from that point going forward, because this has to do with working with the FBI. So the FBI spokesperson, Kevin Wheeler, said that Burham, who, by the way, I don't think I've mentioned the charges yet, but the FBI says he is wanted for rape, unlawful imprisonment, kidnapping, and unlawful flight to avoid prosecution, is also a suspect in a homicide in New York State. So he's got charges as well as some suspicions. So yeah, that's why the FBI is involved. The search began on Sunday after some kidnapping victims called police. So North Charleston police responded Sunday afternoon to a business on Rivers Avenue where two people said they were kidnapped by Burham. The victims told police they live in Pennsylvania and they were kidnapped and forced to drive to North Charleston. I can't even. Thank goodness that they're unharmed, excuse me, and doing okay. Physically, they weren't harmed physically, although I'm sure emotionally, I can't even imagine what they're going through. So, but thankfully, they are alive and well. And also, just as important, they've captured this person who is at least, innocent until proven guilty, of course, although, you know, it's one of those things where it seems pretty clear, uh, but you know, has several very serious charges. So great work by local authorities and anybody else that was involved in ending this manhunt and getting him under arrest. The story that will never end, the Murdaugh family is back in the news, specifically Alec Murdaugh, of course. The U.S. Department of Justice said a federal grand jury has indicted the disbarred Low Country attorney on nearly 24 new charges. Murdaugh, who is 54, has been charged with one count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and bank fraud, one count of bank fraud, a total of 5 counts of wire fraud, one count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and 14 counts of money laundering. As you are all well aware, he is currently serving prison time for the June 2021 shooting deaths of his wife, 52-year-old Maggie Murdaugh, and their son, 22-year-old Paul Murdaugh. This new indictment alleges that Alec, who was a personal attorney, a personal injury attorney at that law firm in Hampton, has engaged in 3 different schemes to obtain money and property from his personal injury clients. So more charges. It just keeps piling on for him. And he's not the only one. Some of his accomplices are also back in the news. Cory Fleming, who is a former criminal defense lawyer from Beaufort and a close friend of Alec, pleaded guilty to one count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud in a scheme involving the theft of $4.3 million. The crime to which Fleming, who is 54 years old, pleaded guilty involved his role in a plot to steal that money and insurance proceeds from the sons of the Murdaugh family's late housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield, who, as you may remember, died of injuries received in a fall on Murdaugh's estate back in February of 2018. So, Cory Fleming pleading guilty. We'll find out soon enough what his punishment will be. And Alec, I'm sure, is going to fight and not plead guilty like Fleming did. Is just, that's just speculation by me and based on statements he's made and other things. But it looks like there will be even more Murdaugh court drama in the future. All right. And lastly, before you take off for your weekend, we're back to Henry McMaster, our governor, a story that happened last weekend. At Saturday's South Carolina Republican Party convention, Governor McMaster said in part, quote, "I look forward to the day that Democrats are so rare we have to hunt them with dogs," end quote. Unsurprisingly, state Democrats have demanded an apology, saying that what he said amounts to a threat or it could encourage political violence, and maybe most clearly is a racially tinged dog whistle, which you can look into why the whole hunt with dogs comment is that way on your own. For the governor himself, his office had said that the governor has been making this joke for years. This isn't the first time he's made it. And everyday South Carolinians understand that it's a joke. So I guess that excuses it because he's been saying it for so long. It's A-okay. So yeah, anyway, I think there's some people who have exaggerated parts of the comment. I'm not going to lie. There are times where people that I respect in politics, I'm like, all right, they're playing the politics game and they're making a bigger deal out of this than needs to be. And I agree with that as far as this statement to an extent. But the part that makes it inappropriate and hard to ignore for me is the dog whistle that it is, as I mentioned, a racially tinged dog whistle. And I think that's why he should apologize. I don't truly believe that Governor McMaster wants to hunt any Democrats and wishes violence on any of them. But like I said, the meaning behind it is the big problem. But also, even just things that a few years ago, putting aside the racial aspect to this, a few years ago, any comments that relate to violence or whatever, depending on how far they went with it, can kind of sort of, they used to be, people would laugh them off or like, oh, they're not serious. And I'm sure Governor McMaster isn't. But as we've seen over the last handful of years, political violence is not something that should be joked about. We've seen different incidents from different groups, whether it's, protesters or January 6th, which, started as a protest of sorts, that these kinds of things signal to a small segment of our population, when you compare, the whole country, that it's A-okay to commit violence against someone you disagree with politically. Or that, like some of the January 6th people have said, like, oh, well, the president told us to storm the Capitol and we thought we were doing what he wanted us to do. You just can't make these kinds of comments anymore anyway. So I just think it's irresponsible. It's also not funny. If it's a joke, it's not funny anyway. And again, besides the violence, which is a big issue, don't get me wrong, just how it is a racially charged term or phrase is also a really, really big problem. And the governor, I mean, honestly, he should just apologize for it. That'll do it for this edition. Get out and enjoy your weekend. Again, regardless of the weather, you can find plans at holycitycenter.com/events. Hopefully it'll be a good news weekend and you can put all this bad news behind you that we have seen. And again, more importantly, just enjoy your weekend. Have fun. Get out there and get away from your devices and the news and everything else. But still go to holycitycenter.com, of course, and view my social media channels, of course, but otherwise get away from your devices and get out. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this podcast, please rate, review, subscribe. That helps us get into the ears of more folks, as well as if you do something like subscribe, it ensures you don't miss any episodes. I also want to thank Lindsay Marie Collins and Cole Collins of LMC Sound System for producing each and every episode of Holy City Center Radio, and Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each episode as well. I forgot to mention, if other ways to support the site, go to holycitycenter.com/shop. You can pick up some merchandise, or go to patreon.com/holycitycenter to sign up for one of those supporter tiers. I am very much looking forward to the long weekend. That's right, it's Memorial Day weekend, so hopefully some of you will also have Monday off like I do, although I'm never really off from Holy City Center stuff, of course. But for my other job, I will be off and looking forward to 3 days. I don't know, no plans yet, but regardless, I'm looking forward to it. I hope you all have a great weekend. I will talk to you again on Monday. And until then, good night and good luck.